Amendment Z2420, inclusionary zoning within protected major transit station areas in the city of Waterloo. This is a formal public meeting to consider this. To consider zoning bylaw amendment Z2420, inclusionary zoning within a protected major transit station area, city of Waterloo. Any persons who want further notice of this application, including the passage of any bylaw, should sign the appropriate registry in the binder located on the desk at the rear of the council chambers. If there is more than one binder, please make sure you are signing the appropriate one. Will the clerk please advise council of the method used to give notice of the meeting and the dates notice was given?
Notice was advertised in the KW Record on January 16, 2025, and emailed or mailed to agencies and public bodies on January 8, 2025. An informal public meeting was not held.
Thank you. The planner, Douglas Stewart, will now give a brief overview of the application. Welcome, Douglas. I believe this is your first time presenting to us as a relatively new member of council. Welcome.
Yes, Mayor, if I may, this is my very first time, so I do appreciate that. To the members of council, staff, and those here, this is a statutory public meeting for an amendment to the zoning bylaw. It deals with a modification of the current bylaw to change a few aspects. So the proposed amendment is to change what was approved on that the implementation date of inclusionary zoning is now set at March 31st, 2025. Staff are proposing that that be amended to the 1st of January 2026. The approved bylaw sets out that the maximum rents are to be set by a bylaw. That is not correct, and we're proposing an amendment. So I'd like to talk about why staff are recommending what's in the report. I think the important part here is staff have undertaken the standard approach of looking at the approved planning framework, which is the provincial planning statement, the Planning Act, the regional plan, our own plan, and the bylaw. First and foremost, we conclude that the proposed amendment does meet, conform with, consistent with that planning framework. But with this request, we believe there's some other factors that should be taken into account. So staff have undertaken in the report a very comprehensive review of those other factors. We ask that council, in its consideration, take into account the planning framework as well as these factors. I think what's important, this is an affordable housing tool that only occurs when private market-based projects advance. It is restricted to those areas identified in the official plan as protected major transit station areas. If you look at our city, it's basically divides our city into a central area where this would apply and east and west where it would not. In our experience, we are continuing to see that as the urban growth occurs, it's more appropriate that it be mid-rise to high-rise. That's how the development, because we've reached our boundaries. So instead of expanding out, we're expanding up. We're seeing, unfortunately, a decline in the number of building permits. That is with us, as well as within the region and in the province and across the country. I want to remind council that this is not a supply issue. There is an abundance of supply that could proceed should the market be supportive. This is not a process issue, in as much as that council has taken steps to improve how the applications occur. What is uncertain is what is the effect of the United States and their proposed tariffs. We certainly would say they're not constructive. We must remind ourselves that under the Affordable Action Plan, there are multiple means where affordable housing is happening. This is one of them. And as much as that, there are also projects advancing that are providing affordable housing, even though it's not required by policy. We have a housing pledge which we are not meeting today. Also, we advise in the report it's not occurring in the city of Kitchener or the city of Cambridge. And when you look across from a provincial point of view, there are some places they are and some are not. Because there's a slow market-based residential, what that translates to is there's little inclusionary zoning being provided. I must point out that since September, when the region approved the official plan, these policies were in effect. What we've also done is felt that after the review we did, that to also supplement that, we retained, along with the region and the cities of Kitchener and Cambridge, an independent planning report that looked at the similar issues. What that report has advised is, from a population perspective, strong population was affected or driven by the non-permanent residents. But the federal government has reduced that, and there are restrictions to that, and that is affecting housing. From a development feasibility, interest rates and construction costs since 2017 have significantly reduced the feasibility of new residential projects. What we're also seeing through that report is condominium market trends are changing. Brand new new sales are sluggish, with only 10% of those released in 2024 being sold. What is happening is, because of affordability and choice in resale market, it has eroded the attractiveness of purchasing pre-construction projects. What the report says is, for a healthy perspective, you need a 10 to 12 month supply of those being available on the market. The report is saying there is a 31-month supply. That certainly shows that there is a slowness. from the rental market has a different perspective. The vacancies remain, rates remain low, and the rental prices have gone down. And that's because there's been a significant number of projects advancing in 2024. But we are seeing a decrease in international students. What also occurs in the rental market is the federal government and their financing programs play a strong impact in that they will secure funding faster and such, and it does provide for the delivery of affordable. I think the key part that has to be considered, if you look at the report, it's saying that when they did their first assessment in 2019 and 2020, there was a high-density residential market strengthening on a yearly basis that potentially could support some capacity to absorb the inclusionary without affecting the market supply. Today, though, that context has changed dramatically. What they are suggesting is that should the policies advance today, it could delay the recovery of IZ and could exacerbate whatever issues there are or challenges in the delivery of market housing. Remember, market housing provides for inclusionary zoning. So staff, taking into account all that we did and the report that supports our findings, are suggesting that the date of implementation should be amended, and we would amend the process that's not required. We're recommending that we continue to meet with the cities, the region, and the industry. We are also suggesting that in the fall, September, that another consultant complete a study to look at the market. And we would provide council with an update in November. And this concludes my presentation, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Douglas. I appreciate that. Council, do you have any questions for staff? Go ahead, Councillor Hanmer.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Douglas, thank you very much for the report, and this is something we've been talking about for a very long time. I appreciate the comments that you've made about the changing market, and there certainly are some other uncertainties that we've got coming on with the tariffs and other things that are happening with our own federal and provincial governments. I just would appreciate some conversation around the timing and the pros and cons. If we delay till January, what impact does that have on buildings that are going on right now? If we stay the course with what had originally proposed, what's the impact?
If I may reply through the mayor. So the intent was to make the change to the 1st of January 2026. Mm-hmm. Part of that change was in discussion with the city of Kitchener. They have made that same change. Mm. So we believe it's very important that both Kitchener and ourselves are at the same stage, so that we don't create a situation where one area it's in place, one area it's not in place. It is not in place in the city of Cambridge. They are not at that stage. That's one aspect. It won't, from what we understand, the existing market conditions, although there's a tremendous supply, there's a lot of development in major transit station areas, could proceed to a building permit today. But they aren't, for a variety of reasons, as we've outlined in the report. We do not believe the delay to January will affect whether any more development would come on. If it should, that's great because of our housing pledge. I think what's important is the change being supported by staff protects the integrity of the current official plan and bylaw that says, as a council, we believe this is an important aspect, but we also understand that there is a financial evaluation that you should not proceed with it where it might undermine the market. In the Ontario regulations, there is a structure that does require that assessment, and that's what we've tried to do in a sense. So this pause protects the integrity of the policy. We don't believe there will be a project advance during that time. It will allow us a chance to continue to see how we can make it so it can advance. We don't know what we don't know about what will change in the marketplace, but I think that our opinion is this is the correct approach from staff, and we're recommending it.
Thank you. I guess if I could do
Yeah.
a follow-on. I appreciate the unpredictability. I guess I struggle a little bit with what's going to be different in September than now. What's going to be different in November? And are we going to be looking at either a similar delay, because we still don't know? I know I'm asking you the crystal ball of what can you predict, and we don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow, which could have an impact on us as well.
If I may reply through the mayor, as my family have told me, you're a planner. Don't you predict what's going to occur in the future?
Exactly.
And my comment is, I've looked in my crystal ball. It's awfully fuzzy. I don't know what will be different. I do not anticipate it will be significantly different. But what it will allow us to do is to continue the discussion with the industry to find a means that the industry finds acceptable for this to occur and to advance the market-based ones. I'm not sure we are not going to be having this same discussion. But I also think it's important that, as we suggested as staff, that we in Kitchener be on the same page, and this would accomplish that. I think it will allow, we don't know what the federal government will do, what the provincial government will do. We understand that housing to this council, to the province and the federal government is an important aspect. It's a very good supporter of the economy. This is not a City of Waterloo issue. This is not a provincial issue. This is really a federal issue.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I may have other questions later.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Councillor Wright.
Thanks, through you, Mayor. So I kind of want to build a little bit on what Councillor Hanmer was talking about. First, just a comment about the situation in Toronto where, they have implemented inclusionary zoning. And I just want to note that their purpose-built rental is exempt until 2026. I mean, that's what it says on their website. I don't know whether there's any current deliberations by Toronto Council that is impacting that. The other thing that they point to is municipalities may offer reduced fees, tax breaks, or expedited approvals to offset the costs of inclusionary zoning. And one of the things that they were doing was freezing development charges at the 2022 rate. Obviously, every community is going to have its own combination of incentives that they could consider. The thing that has sort of popped out to me in particular is in the Barry Lyons report, it talks about this glut of condo supply and that the prices are still really very high and that they don't anticipate them coming down, which is sort of one of those situations where you end up with the market departing from supply and demand conditions. I mean, normally you would have extra supply and prices would drive down. That's not the case here. So like we have that condition, but we also have whatever potential inflationary pressures might arise from tomorrow's US administration decision. And we've got an unknown interest rate environment potentially arising from that. So given these particular headwinds and understanding that, you know, the crystal ball is very, very foggy, it's not just foggy, it's almost like permanently distorted. So I don't know when we're ever going to get back to a normal set of market conditions. Like the one thing we've been able to count on at council is the purpose-built rental coming in as applications. And so I wonder if part of this discussion should really be around what portion of the applications that come in, or like what portion of this market-based housing should be part of inclusionary zoning in a nearer term versus a longer term. Like, is there a way for us to even look at that? And I wonder from planning staff whether you have some ideas about that.
Over to you, Douglas. Did you get all that?
I did. I would
There was a
like
lot
to-
in there.
If I could defer to,
Adam?
Sure.
Yes, to
Thanks, Douglas. It's a good question. There are a lot of uncertainties, as I think everybody knows and everyone's picking up on. You know, in my 17 years at the city, I haven't seen such an uncertain time and haven't seen a real estate market that's as challenged as it is today, right? So whether or not the program, what it could look like in the future, depending on what interest rates look like, you know, whether or not the economy slows down, there's a lot of unknowns there. And I think as staff, we would be asking those questions in the future if, you know, unfortunate events take place. What I would say though, right now, what's before council are the 5 recommendations, and they don't really contemplate a rejigging of the program, but really what staff's recommending is a pause. We certainly can ask those questions if council wants to direct us to do that in the time that, you know, between now and January 1st, 2026. I think those are good questions to ask is really what I'm saying back to you.
Yeah, did you
If I
have?
may add one thing?
Go ahead,
through
Douglas,
the-
sure.
Through the mayor. We saw recently where the city of Mississauga reduced its development charges, where they followed what the city of Vaughan had done. We don't know what effect that has had, and I think the next 9 months we would find it out.
Thank you.
So
Did you have
that
a
leads
follow-up?
directly to my follow-up,
Okay.
which was going to be about of those communities that have gone down this implementation process for inclusionary zoning. You know, like, are we in touch with them about any sort of, you know, things that are working, things that are not, discussions that are positive versus discussions that are stalling? Do you have context on some of those other markets at all?
Is that to Adam?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, inclusionary zoning it's still pretty new in Ontario. My understanding around Toronto is that their framework hasn't been approved by the ministry. And so, it would be very helpful for us if their program was alive and active. But my understanding is that it isn't. And so, the market, the IZ framework hasn't really been tested out in a lot of municipalities to date, with Kitchener having paused their program. That would have provided a little bit more window. So I would say that, yes, we're in touch with the municipalities that are developing IZ. There aren't a lot of them. And there's not a lot to glean from the programs because a lot of them aren't active yet.
can I but does IZ not exist in some other provinces? Or are you just referring to Ontario?
Yeah, I was referring to Ontario.
But
Yeah.
it does exist in other provinces,
Yes.
correct? Yeah, okay. I don't know, do you know anything from the examples in other provinces that you could?
What I would say is we're not really in touch with.
Okay.
Some of the frameworks are just quite different in, the whole planning regime, for example, in British Columbia is quite different than here. So we would be looking mostly to Ontario examples. Even in the United States, just to give it a little bit more color, inclusionary zoning doesn't have the same caps that the province of Ontario brought into place. So the 5% cap doesn't exist, where you might have inclusionary zoning representing 20% of a particular project in Colorado. So it's hard to compare apples to apples because the frameworks aren't the same.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Wright.
Just a point of clarification, if I may, Mayor. On the Toronto minister approval that's required for their inclusionary zoning, is that because of the Toronto Act and because we're governed by the Municipal Act more broadly?
It's a good question. My understanding, how to say this, is that for reasons that I'm not aware of, the province hasn't approved their program. I believe that part of the restrictions that were brought forward in the Planning Act around inclusionary zoning were in part derived off of some of the draft work that the province was seeing coming from Toronto. So I think that their program originally was quite aggressive, and the province tailored the legislation in response.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Thank you so much for your presentation and the conversation. I'm just thinking of what we're considering this evening with the inclusionary zoning, along with what I'm seeing specifically in Ward 6, where I do have developer applications in the pipeline, different stages, that are including affordable housing. So I'm wondering if you could just give me a sense of if there's the sense from staff that would continue, why that's happening, why developers are including affordable housing, and what they're tapping into to ensure that that's available to them.
I'll take that question as well. And purpose-built rental projects, which have been alluded to, are really buoyed by the federal government. CMHC provides low-cost, low-interest loans to purpose-built rental projects, and then also longer amortization, so 50-year amortization for purpose-built rental projects. And those two elements, it's my understanding, they're really keeping the pro formas alive for purpose-built rental projects. And in order to obtain CMHC financing, those projects need to provide some amount of affordable housing. And so then when those applications come to chambers, they've already built that in to their pro forma, and they're in some cases looking for some additional benefit on planning permissions on some of those the affordable housing levels that they've already having to be provided through that program. So the purpose-built rental program is really being kept alive, and a lot of the projects we're seeing because of the federal government support, which is really a level of it's taxpayer support through those lower interest loans and longer amortizations. On the condo side, you know, there's not a lot of condo projects that are coming forward for building permit. Certainly, there's a lot in the planning system that are being proposed, but as Mr. Stewart has alluded to, they're not progressing right now. So the condo side doesn't really have the same support, and so you're not seeing the market activity.
Thank you. Did you have a follow-up?
I do. Thank you very much. I don't know if you can answer this, Adam, but do you know if there are any expectations then within the federal government funding or support that there would be a timeline for an actual build, like to pull the permit? And I know that's not directly related to IZED.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
just
just-
curious because of our conversation
Right.
about the stagnant market.
I don't know the answer to that question.
That's another crystal ball type question, I think, but I said that's another sort of crystal ball type question. Councillor Bassick? No, you're okay? Okay, Councillor Hanmer.
Thank you. Just probably to staff as well. When we think about our whole building that we want to be doing in the affordable housing area, the inclusionary zone is just one tool that we need to use or that's available to us. So the idea, I'm following up on Councillor Rowe's question about the applications coming through with a percentage in of affordable housing. We would continue to do both in parallel or consider, because being in a ward that isn't a major transit center anywhere, the only option we would have is to look at things that might include a percentage of affordable housing as part of a build. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. There's a lot of other work that's taking place. The council is driving forward. For example, 2025 University Avenue might represent 60 years of supply under the inclusionary zoning scheme or project. And so certainly council can really move forward a lot of affordable housing units through that project. Inclusionary zoning is really about delivering a nominal amount of units per year over time for 25-year terms, so that over that, once you kind of hit the 26th year, the system is rejuvenating itself. That's kind of the idea. But there's a lot that the city's already doing to create a lot of supply of affordable housing units. There's the Affordable Housing Grant Program as well that's targeting the nonprofit sector. That will deliver units as well and support specifically the nonprofit sector. I would also note, the 4-unit, 4-story zoning that council passed in December. It's not necessarily affordable housing related, but it is really around supply and important supply even in different contexts. So might get within your ward, for example. So. Inclusionary zoning aside, there's still quite a lot of effort being put towards supply and then affordable housing. Hopefully that helps.
It does, and I think that's a piece for all of us to remember, that when we're looking at the issue of having housing and having appropriate housing, we need to look at all the different tools that we've got, and so inclusionary zoning is one that's very important to be able to do, recognizing it's market fickle at the moment, and so we need to take that into account. But there also are other things that we've been doing, as you've pointed out, Adam, thank you, to carry us forward. Thanks.
And just to add to that, the region of Waterloo, through some of the funding programs that they've instituted over the last 4 or 5 years. There's the Building Better Futures that have built 2,707 affordable or deeply affordable units. And there's a report on Regional Council's agenda for tomorrow at committee about, and they delivered those in 4 years versus 5. And there's a report tomorrow that we're considering that's looking at approximately 3,500 more, but targeting very low income category because there's a real gap in the market there. So just to your point of there's a lot going on, just to add that as well. Councillor Bodley.
Excuse me, thank you. Through you, Mayor McCabe. Just a couple of quick points of clarification that I did want to make given the discussion we've been having. But the City of Toronto's inclusionary zoning policy is substantially higher set-aside rates than what we are talking about as well too, which may have something to do with why it has not yet been approved by the province, perhaps. And I would also like to note that beyond just what I agree with Mr. Lauder about the nominal amount, but it was the intent behind inclusionary zoning is also about ensuring that affordable housing is not exclusively in areas away from transit, that to sort of acknowledge that we especially need this type of housing in these MTSAs. So I want to make sure that council does not lose sight of that as well too. My two questions that I have are, I appreciate and understand the justification, a lot of the justification within the report is speaking to the market conditions, and that is the primary reason that we are being asked to consider deferring this. And I guess my question is, can staff recall another time or a situation in which we altered a regulation that was before council based primarily on market conditions?
I've only been here since October, so
So that lets
I'm going to
Douglas-
make, that's my excuse. I apologize.
No, that lets Douglas off the hook, maybe. I wonder if Mr. Ormson, or I don't know, Adam, if you had,
I'm happy
Okay.
to just provide
Okay.
a little bit of background and then kick it over to either Mr. Cotter or Mr. Ormson. What I would note is that the regulation that governs inclusionary zoning requires the market assessment. And so I'll kick it over to Mr. Cotter or Mr. Ormson in a second, but this particular work is in the legislation that guides it, really requires that lens to be applied because it is leveraging the private sector. The province, when they drafted that regulation, I believe they wanted to make sure that the private sector and the market was healthy before inclusionary zoning was applied to the market. So, you know, I can't think of an example, but I just want to point towards, in this case, we actually have to look at that based on legislation.
Sure, through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Bodley. Over the years, council has modified and made some decisions based on financial considerations. The most recent example that comes to mind is adjusting our parkland or providing exemptions to our parkland rates, where at the time, the City of Kitchener provided development charge exemptions for its downtown area. And this council responded again, not with development charges, but with modifications to parkland, again, to offset costs related to development to try and again spur certain objectives. And certainly this council and the planning division is constantly looking at market trends and trying to get ahead of some of those trends. You know, a few years ago, we rarely saw a stacked townhouse being constructed and did not have that use generally in the zoning bylaw. Certainly it's there today, and it's a very common type of construction that we're seeing. So council and staff do work to look at what conditions are out there, how the market is evolving, and trying to respond accordingly. But, you know, the economics of the market are up and down. We're seeing some indications that, you know, into 2025, into 2026, 2027, the market was looking a little bit better based on some forecasting. What the U.S. administration will do to that, who knows? We don't have a crystal ball either, but it certainly is up and down, and we do respond from time to time, making certain decisions with respect to some of the financial levers that we have to respond to market conditions.
Yeah,
thank you, Mr. Cotter. Did you have a follow-up?
I have a second question.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that additional context about inclusionary zoning, and yeah, none of that was intended to suggest that we're not keenly aware of what's going on in the market and paying attention to trends and whatnot. It was more about whether the market is driving our regulatory position or whether the priorities of the community are driving our regulatory position, so, but I appreciate that added context, thank you. The second question that I had, or the last question that I had was, should council decide not to defer inclusionary zoning and let it go forward, do we have current opportunities within the framework to review those set-aside rates? Because it is my understanding that for each of the different MTSAs, we were already sort of phasing it in over a period of time. Should we approve or not defer inclusionary zoning here? The double negatives are killing me a bit, but if that's the direction that council chose, would we then be able to, for example, a couple of years from now, look at a potential increase that we have in our schedule and say, maybe we'll hold that for now? Is that something that's at council's discretion in the future?
Certainly, that could happen. It would be subject to a zoning bylaw amendment in the future. But yeah, that table within the zoning bylaw that activates inclusionary zoning those numbers could change. They're coordinated with Kitchener, and if and when Cambridge brings a program forward, that table is coordinated. And so staff would be noting that it might make some sense to if there's going to be step changes, to make those step changes, or have Kitchener and Cambridge consider those as well. But yes, that's possible.
If I may, it also might require an official plan amendment.
It may, he said it may.
I'd have to confirm. I can't speak to it, but I believe it's in the official plan as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bassick.
Thanks through you, Mayor. Thinking back to what Councillor Wright was talking about in other jurisdictions, I would anticipate that there was pushback there as well from the development community. And I'm just curious what the nature of that pushback might have been.
I can't, within other jurisdictions outside of Ontario, I can't provide a response as to what that pushback might have been, other than to speculate.
Okay, that's fine. So I'll just comment that I am not surprised we're receiving pushback, and I think no matter what the market conditions were or the uncertainty in the world were, I anticipate we'd be having this conversation anyways. There may just be other, maybe different concerns. I think that's a potential, so I'm just curious about that. And then my second question is, I'm just curious how you believe we've been able to navigate differences between us and Kitchener before, such as DC's exemptions and parkland. How do we manage those? We don't feel like we can manage this one, but we have been able to manage things like that in the past. So curious how we were able to navigate those, but we definitely don't think we can navigate this one.
Well, the development charge exemption in downtown Kitchener did have the effect of bringing a significant amount of development to downtown Kitchener, and developers, and certainly we heard in the planning department that developers that did work in Waterloo did shift their work to Kitchener, and certainly that happened, and their downtown gained a lot of development. So, I think in that case it did have an effect, and I think in this case, it may have an effect. I'm not entirely sure. I think what Mr. Douglas or Mr. Seward has identified is that the market generally isn't healthy. And it's really, from staff's perspective, inclusionary zoning and creating the program and bringing it forward is a founding principle is doing it under a healthy market condition. And staff's perspective is really that that doesn't exist today. As to whether or not it will have an impact on Waterloo's competitiveness with Kitchener, I'm not entirely sure what that will look like. I actually think that the development charge exemption in Kitchener had a larger impact much larger impact than being out of sync on in inclusionary zoning. But it's really around the founding principle of inclusionary zoning, of doing it when the market can deliver units.
Thanks, and I just have one more question right now, which is, if the market is struggling so much and we're trying to do as much as we can, have we been considering deregulating multiple other programs we have at the city to really expedite development? If the market conditions are so bad that developers can't build, maybe we should be doing substantially more rather than just not implementing inclusionary zoning in the modest percentages. So have we been contemplating other more substantial changes to deregulate?
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Vasek, certainly staff and council have been working hard towards streamlining our approval processes to, reduce what some people would call red tape, allow approvals to move faster through the process. The city will be reviewing its development charge bylaw and some of the other programs in 2025. So are we constantly reviewing our programs and our planning system in response to kind of contemporary conditions? We do that, but ultimately council sets the direction that we follow based on the community's priorities. And for Waterloo, I would say there are distinctions between Waterloo and Kitchener for sure. Historically, we've planned our communities to some degree with different objectives. More recently, we've been working to try and harmonize many of our programs, so there is some consistency and fluidity to how planning is undertaken, particularly with the regional downloading that has come through as a result of Bill 23. But ultimately, we constantly do look at our systems to try and improve and respond to the market.
Okay, thanks.
If I may
yes.
reply, from a fresh perspective and from an outside perspective, what the city of Waterloo is doing with all of the legislative changes we've seen, they're responding, and the official plan is being updated and the processes. As I indicated in what I presented, this is not an issue of process. This is an economy issue.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer your question? Did you have a follow-up?
No.
Okay. Thank you very much, Council, for your questions and staff for your answers. Just a couple of comment or questions from me. I'm just wondering, so I think part of what's frustrating with this issue is that the consultations have gone on for 7 or 8 years. I'm just curious what may have changed in the it's been called pushback, or what are the concerns that the development communities brought over the past 7 or 8 years, and have those changed? You haven't been here, Douglas. I appreciate that. So maybe that's a question for Adam.
I was here on the other side.
You were on the other side. Okay, if you could answer it, yeah.
It's a good question. In the earlier days of proposing a program, I would say there were philosophical differences of opinion around whether or not the private market should be relied on to provide affordable housing units. I think over time, the focus has shifted, and kind of the recent good times, I think the industry was kind of gearing up and getting ready and looking at different ways that they could deliver markets to the unit, to deliver units to the market, and meet the objectives of inclusionary zoning. And so some of the conversation was around, does inclusionary zoning, do the units have to be within the same station area? Do they have to stay within the same community, being the city? And there was discussion with council around elements like that. So it was really looking at more operationalized details. More recently, the discussions have been around, there just really isn't a private market right now. I'm sharing the perspective that we heard. And so that's really what has been provided to us. The future is uncertain, and they've been really reflecting that back to us.
Right. Oh, Go ahead, Mr. Connor.
And just to build on Mr. Lauder's comments, I think, over the last 5 years or so, we've seen interest rates increase. We've seen construction costs dramatically increase. We've seen shifts in labor availability. The pandemic has played a role. So there's a number of factors that I think, since we started the IZ journey.
I was going to say, it's a Z.
Yeah, IZ journey, back a number of years ago, as Mr. Stewart indicated, the original assessment in 2019 indicated that we were still seeing strong growth and that there was the ability year over year seeing growth within the high-rise sector and the ability to absorb inclusionary zoning into that framework. Since that assessment was done, some of those factors have taken hold, and that is really kind of the position that we find ourselves in is a different economic condition that existed when we did the initial assessment in 2019. So that, building on what Mr. Lauder had indicated, those are some of the challenges I think the industry has responded to us and indicated that they are challenged to move some products forward. And without the help of the federal government, as Mr. Lauder indicated, around purpose-built rental, amortization and interest rates, the high-rise market would really be in a difficult position.
Thank you. My other question, just around the consultations that were noted, I'm curious because it listed that the development sector was consulted and that it was put on our Engage WR page. But was there any specific outreach done to people who advocate, like to nonprofits who build affordable housing or groups that work with people, like low-income people seeking housing? I'm just wondering, I see Michelle Lee putting her hand up there. You want to get into the conversation, Michelle?
Through you, Mayor. We did quite extensive consultation back in 2019 all the way up to the adoption of the program, not just with the development community, but also to those who we felt were probably the most likely to be recipients of these units. So we had some focus groups with affordable housing providers, but also specific focus groups with individuals who identified as being low to moderate income households. So this was done in coordination with the City of Kitchener and the City of Cambridge.
Okay, great, thank you. I just think it's important to make sure that we know that their voices were heard in this consultation as well. Seeing no other questions from staff, from council, we'll let you sit down now, Mr. Stewart.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's no registered delegations listed. However, as this is a public meeting, is there anyone, I have to ask, is there anyone present tonight who wishes to speak to this application? You'd like to speak, or are you leaving, Paul? Okay. Thanks for coming, Paul. So please just provide your name and your municipality of residence for the record, and you have 5 minutes.
Sure. Paul Levesque from Urban Legend Developments. I build condos in the Kitchener-Waterloo region, and I'm a resident of Woolwich Township. I'll keep it really short. I just wanted to say that I'm in support of staff's recommendation, and I'd like to also add some context, I guess, from a market perspective. Being someone that, my living is dependent on being able to build houses. I haven't been able to build anything in a couple of years now. So, I try my best to build when I can, but when there's no market, it's really tough to make a living. And since the report that was, the study that was done on behalf of staff back in October, the market has declined even further. It's in really rough shape. I've been in this business 25 years. I've never seen it so bad, to be honest. This reminds me of the early 1990s, if you recall that time. That's how bad it is, and I think that looking forward, I'm always looking forward because obviously that's what puts food on the table for me. I don't see things getting better in the near term, certainly this year. If that adds any context or color to what's going to happen. I don't think your decision today really will make much of a difference because I don't see any projects actually moving forward in my industry amongst myself or my peers, just simply because there's not enough demand for people buying condominiums today in today's market. So that's all I'd like to say, but if you have any questions for me from an industry standpoint, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Councillor Bassick, go ahead.
Thanks, through you, Mayor. To clarify what you're saying, it's that whether or not we approve this tonight will have no bearing on whether or not you decide to build anyways?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. I think it was one of staff's comments, 0 of 0 is 0. So I don't see any projects moving forward this year. So to answer your question, I'm not sure that it really is going to matter. If anything, though, what it will do, though, is it will postpone, because there is a cost to the private sector to delivering the inclusionary zoning units. When the market does start to recover, it will postpone that recovery. Because right now, the reason that nobody's buying condos is to deliver a new housing unit costs roughly $75,000 to $100,000 more than the resale market. Inclusionary zoning is going to add anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 more on top of that differential. So market conditions will rebalance over time, but because the differential is going to be greater, it's going to take longer to rebalance.
I'm no business person, but my curiosity for you is, say there was a building you were building, and I know you build bigger buildings, but say you were building a building with 10 units, and your set-aside rate was 1%. So you have to build 1 unit of affordable units. Is there any way to recoup that cost from the other 9 market-based? And would, as a business person, might you do that? Or would you just say, I'm gonna personally suffer the loss of that because I have to do inclusionary zoning?
So through you, Mayor, unfortunately, the second option is not an option because in order to get financing for that project, the pro forma has to show a certain profitability in order for banks to finance that. Our projects are always financed with lenders. So we put a certain amount of equity in ourselves and the rest comes from bank funding. Usually it's around 75%. So without a proper pro forma that works, banks are not going to lend to us. So the only way to recover the cost of delivering that inclusionary zoning unit is to recover it from the other 9 units. So it all just gets factored into the costs and the revenues of the project.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to understand. And so you wouldn't increase the cost slightly of the other 9 units to recover the loss?
That's what I'm saying, we would
Yeah,
have to,
yeah,
yes.
Right, and
Yes.
so as a business person, wouldn't you do that? And what are the barriers? I don't see why you can't do that, I guess is my question.
We can,
Yeah.
but what I'm saying is our prices are already too high relative to the resale market. That's the reason nobody is buying our product right now. So this just makes the problem worse, thus delaying the recovery. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Bassick. Are there any other questions of the delegate? Seeing none, thanks very much,
Okay.
Paul. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Council.
Are there is there anyone else present tonight who wishes to speak to this? Okay, seeing none. If there are no more delegations, this formal public meeting is now concluded and the application is now open to council for a motion and debate. Go ahead, Councillor Bodley.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor McCabe. I have a proposed alternative recommendation for council to consider, and I think clerks are going to maybe bring that up on screen. It is lengthy, but maybe not super lengthy, and I have distributed this amongst my colleagues so they knew what was coming here ahead of time. And should I have a seconder, I will read what I'm supposed to read.
Is there, so
if
this
not,
is
I'll
moved
go
by
home.
Councillor Bodley, seconded by Councillor Bassett.
Okay, so just to read this first, and then to get into the reasons. Whereas council has considered all written and oral submissions, and whereas council has considered the professional opinions of planning staff, therefore be it resolved that council not approve report IPPW 2025-014, that council not approve zoning bylaw amendment Z-24-20, inclusionary zoning within protected major transit station areas, City of Waterloo, as set out in Appendix A of IPPW 2025-014, that planning staff not be directed to continue to consult with the City of Kitchener, the City of Cambridge, and the Region of Waterloo to evaluate the timing of implementation of inclusionary zoning, that planning staff not be directed to undertake an additional market assessment no later than September 30th, 2025, and that planning staff not provide an update to council no later than November 30th, 2025, with the results of the consultation and the market assessment, and to provide recommendations on the timing of implementation of inclusionary zoning, which is a mouthful. But to maybe share some of my rationale for the proposed alternative direction that is on the screen before my colleagues this evening. I'll just note that council approved inclusionary zoning in June after many, many years of work by staff, collaborating with our municipal partners, lengthy engagement with the development industry and community at large, as has been discussed this evening. At the time council approved this, we spoke about a lot, and we've spoken tonight as well, about a lot of the great work we have been doing in the planning department to incentivize development in our community. And we've spoken tonight about a healthy market. We've done a lot on our end to ensure a healthy market, lots. And even since we've approved inclusionary zoning, that includes now changes to our OP that increase height up to 30 stories in MTSAs with a commitment to look beyond that height. It includes permitting up to 4 stories and 4 units citywide. It includes a number of housing accelerator fund initiatives to enable more missing middle housing, to streamline development applications, as well as enabling city-owned land for affordable housing at 2025 University, and even acquiring new land with the intent of converting it to affordable housing just last week. I am immensely grateful for all of the hard work that our staff have been doing in the planning department, including on inclusionary zoning, and while I respect the staff recommendation, I believe the time is now for us to move ahead with our IZ bylaw. I fully respect and understand the justification. I acknowledge that the economic conditions for development are not yet where we want them to be. That includes some of the challenges highlighted, like construction costs, land values, interest rates, and more. Staff highlight that some of these challenges have been impeding development since 2017, which is of interest since that is around the time when we began the work on inclusionary zoning. And while I appreciate that there are challenges since 2017, there has also been strong development in the city of Waterloo since then, and we could alternatively look at those as lost opportunities for affordable units within these MTSAs when the market was indeed hot. That said, as the report highlights, staff continue to believe that IZ should be implemented when feasible, and at the end of the day, while there are uncertainties in the market, I believe we should implement policies that we think are right while trying to tackle those uncertainties, not based solely on these market conditions. I continue to believe that this is the right policy for all of the reasons council chose to implement it in June. And so the alternative recommendation here is to acknowledge some of the challenges the development community is facing, to offer some flexibility to the development industry. And what it would do is it would, any development that already has their site plan approval in place by the end of this month, and there are many of those within the city of Waterloo, they would be fully exempt from the IZ bylaw so long as they pull their building permit within the next 2 years, giving them 2 years to secure financing, to adjust to the market, and perhaps incentivizing them to pull those building permits. The further exemptions also provide greater flexibility to negotiate set-aside limits as part of any city-owned land disposition, so we are not beholden to the IZ set-aside rates and could potentially negotiate higher amounts. Again, perhaps this may provide an incentive for the approximately 4,400 units that are ready to go in site plan and awaiting building permit to move forward. And lastly here, just as part of our engagement process, what we heard from the development community, that what they were seeking was fairness and certainty. So moving ahead with IZ, while acknowledging some of these challenges and attempting to address them as best we can through this proposed direction, seeks to address that fairness piece, and implementing this IZ policy without deferral affords the development community with that certainty that they are seeking as well. And so for those reasons, I would appreciate council considering the recommendation on screen.
Thank you, Councillor Bodley, for providing that amendment and providing it to council for consideration prior. I'm going to use my chair's prerogative and just make a few comments myself, because I am going to I'm going to ask for I'm going to move a deferral on this. And I'll explain why. So we have been talking about this issue. I mean, I haven't been in this chair for the entire 7 or 8 years, but we, as Councillor Bodley just outlined, this issue has been talked about in the community and across the province for many, many years. And I get that it's frustrating to continue to have these consultations and to kind of continue to hear why it won't work and when it won't work. And yes, there are probably lost opportunities where it could have been implemented a few years ago. But we are where we are. And part of what I'm concerned about is that, to go back to Councillor Hanmer's point about the muddy crystal ball, or maybe that was Mr. Stewart's comments. Part of where my head is at is that, because this is really challenging. The City of Waterloo clearly is very committed to building affordable housing and doing what we can to support housing of all types, varieties, for all people of all ages, stages, incomes, and abilities. And we've made great strides forward with the 2025 University Avenue project that is underway. We bought St. Columba Church made a motion to acquire that property. There's many, many other things, as Councillor Bodley just pointed out. But what is sticking in my mind is the uncertainty that's out there. We've just elected a new government, re-elected, sorry, I should say the provincial government. And, there are a lot of signs that, they're reforming their government, they're reforming cabinet. They are to come out with a budget, I am expecting at some point in March. With the need and we know that the economy is really uncertain with the tariffs hovering over us, and we also know that throughout the election there was a lot of discussion about housing. So, I think it's prudent since we're so close to when the provincial government's going to come out with a budget, that we should wait to see what the provincial government may or may not do in March or April. We're looking at a time where the federal government may go into an election, and then that may change some of the landscape as well. And then, of course, there's the uncertainty of tariffs that are hanging over us, and we don't know, are they being applied, are they not? What will that do to our communities, to sectors, to across the entire community? So what I would like to propose is to direct staff. Oh, sorry, I need to pass the chair over before I can do this. Councillor Wright is the acting mayor this month.
Sorry, can I have a point of order just for clarification here? We have this on the floor right now, so
But a deferral.
I'm curious if you could just explain the process here for me.
Sure. For council, so under the procedure bylaw, you've moved a motion and an amendment can be proposed, and then the amendment needs to be dealt with before. And I think yours is an amendment versus a
Sorry,
deferral.
did I call it? Yeah.
Yeah, it has the effect of doing that.
deferring, yeah.
So anyone on council is certainly able to propose an amendment or one additional sub-amendment, but the mayor does need to leave the chair in order to propose that motion.
So I will look to Councillor Wright to take over chair.
Okay, so now I'm going to chair this and ask you again that you're proposing an amendment?
Yes, I'd like to propose, pardon? Propose an amendment to this. And I had shared it with staff.
To the original staff motion or to Councillor Bodley's?
To the original staff motion.
What the mayor is proposing is an amendment to Councillor Bodley's motion, which in effect replaces Councillor Bodley's motion with a new motion that is now on screen. So council needs to consider this new amendment before they would go back to the main motion. And you could actually further amend this one more time.
So this is, it's up on screen. I'll just read it, that council directs staff to bring forward to the March 24th, 2025 meeting of council a zoning bylaw for Z 2420, inclusionary zoning within a protected major transit area, City of Waterloo, that would defer implementation of the inclusionary zoning provisions to an undetermined date in the future, and that staff report back in June 2025, with recommendations to propose a new implementation date. Clerk? Oh, sorry, I'm not chairing.
Would the clerk please speak?
And to just add to that, the Bill 73 wording that Councillor Bodley read still stands with the reasons that you've indicated for your amendment.
Okay. Do we need a seconder
I was
before we
going to
have
say, I would look
comments?
for a
and
seconder for that.
Another point of order is requested from Councillor Bassett.
Thanks, through you, Chair Wright. Okay, this is, I don't mean this facetiously. I am truly just trying to understand. So we're allowed to have one more amendment that's like permitted. So if I really wanted to discuss an amendment to this, so this being an amendment to Councillor Bodley's. So if I really wanted to discuss Councillor Bodley's, I could say my amendment is exactly Councillor Bodley's amendment, and then we would just go back to discuss that. I know it sounds facetious, but I'm just trying to understand if there is a...
Can you please, clerk, please talk about the process here?
To council, I don't think that would be the intent of that being a sub-amendment.
Thank you for that clarification. So as, again, is this another request about a point of order? Okay, a clarification. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just from my understanding, because I feel like this is the first time I've experienced this. So the mayor is requesting an amendment, but Councillor Body has an amendment, and the mayor is asking to defer Councillor Body's amendment or to the original motion.
Clerk.
Councillor Bodley has a motion. So staff have given council a recommendation, which is up to council to consider. So what Councillor Bodley has done, has suggested an alternate recommendation for council to consider. So it's not really an amendment to the staff report, it's an alternate recommendation to consider. And the mayor is proposing an amendment to that, which is what is in front of you right now to discuss. There is one other thing that can be done, which is a deferral, which would defer the report in its entirety this evening. So no decision would be made, although staff would recommend that that would need to come back by March 24th. If the intention was to do something different than to put inclusionary zoning in place by March 31st, because inclusionary zoning is in the zoning bylaw already. It comes into effect March 31st. If nothing happens tonight, or if nothing happens on March 24th, you have inclusionary zoning effective March 31st. So if there was an interest in actually deferring to come back on March 24th with more information, it has to be stated that it's coming back on March 24th. So those are really the options in front of you right now.
Is it a point of order, Mayor?
It was just to explain it was just to speak to it briefly.
Just to speak to it briefly. I think we need a seconder before we can do
True,
that.
we need a seconder, so I've moved it.
Is there a seconder?
Yes, I'll second it, just to get discussion going.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now we can go back to Mayor McCabe to comment on this revised motion.
Thank you. And apologies for creating the confusion, but again, the difference between what I've proposed here and just simply deferring it until March 24th is that if we come back March 24th to continue to discuss this, we still don't know really what's going to happen provincially, federally. We don't know what's, there's other tariffs that might come on April 2nd. We haven't kind of really gone past that initial month to 2 months of real uncertainty. So what I'm proposing is to move this to June so that we will have a bit better line of sight on what the provincial government might do because, with changes potentially to legislation. I mean, it is a big question mark. We will very likely have gone through a federal election by then, and that landscape may change. And then, of course, there's the tariffs that continue to hang over our heads. We don't really know what might happen tomorrow and then again on April 2nd. So this is just giving us more time to really understand what's going to be happening or may happen.
Okay, as a point of order, thank you, Mayor. As a point of order now, would we need to vote on this in order to determine whether we're going back to Councillor Bodley's motion?
Yes, if I may, you would need to vote on this, and then if it fails, you automatically go back to the main motion, which is Councillor Bodley's. And I did want to add, just for clarity, so March 24th, what would come to council would be a zoning bylaw amendment, which in effect defers inclusionary zoning. And then in June, what would come back would be a report with, for council to, reconsider what date or council wanted to start inclusionary zoning, or if you wanted to defer it to another date. So in effect, this motion would defer the start date of inclusionary zoning until at least June of 2025.
Are there any other questions on this revised motion that is on the table currently? Okay, yes, you may.
Spitballing a comment here, I guess. Yeah, I appreciate what the mayor is trying to do. It's very difficult to seek certainty in very uncertain times, and I appreciate that the mayor is very passionate about inclusionary zoning and affordable housing in general as well too, and wants to find a way to get this moving. But I won't support the amendment here. And I think the main reason for me in not supporting the amendment is because I think this is the appropriate time for us to make the decision. And should we be feeling like the uncertainty is too much and is a perfectly legitimate justification for deferring inclusionary zoning as per the staff recommendation, I would suggest that we be better off just deferring as per the staff recommendation from my perspective. But I just wanted to make that comment, and I do appreciate what you're looking at here, Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Basak.
Yeah, thanks through you, Chair Wright. I also won't support it. I think there are, I appreciate the development community's concerns, and I want them to build, and I don't really want to put up barriers to that community's ability to build. I don't. I think we have been doing lots of stuff at the city to enable that, based on staff recommendations and opportunities that have come our way, like St. Columba last week. And I believe in everybody sitting around this table having really good intentions around affordable housing. We keep doing this as a society, pushing decisions forward because of fear. And do you know who's afraid? People who are at risk of losing their homes, which is going to make more people homeless. People who can't find homes because there's not enough affordable ones. And so when I weigh this decision, and I don't know if this is the most pragmatic decision, and I try to make pragmatic decisions and value-based decisions. Sometimes I err on the side of a value-based decision where I say, yes, we are living in the real world and the development community is having a hard time getting financing. I get that. And then I also think of all the folks who are really struggling and have real day-to-day fears. I'm quite sorry, but I'm not afraid of the development community's ability to put food on their families' tables. And I'm sorry if that sounds harsh, but I'm just not. And so my fear-based decision is to not move this forward. I fear for people who are really struggling, and I could be completely wrong on this decision, and I should make a more pragmatic decision, but I'm quite done with how we've been operating in this society to date, and I'm just willing to risk that to say enough is enough. We need to just move forward with these hard decisions, even if the market conditions aren't ideal. I believe if we say yes to inclusionary zoning now, we will all figure it out, and we will help the development community fight in the appropriate ways that they need to at the provincial and the federal levels, if that's really where it needs to be. And so I'm going to make a decision that I think is potentially very flawed, but I will be able to be sitting around the table feeding my family in years and say, man, that was hard and I might have really messed up, but I think that's the direction we needed to go.
Thank you, Councillor Basak. Are there any other comments before we call the vote? No. Okay, so,
Just to quickly
Okay.
say, or
Go
am I
ahead.
acknowledged?
Go
Sorry.
ahead, Mayor McCabe.
Just to quickly say, I mean, I hear what you're saying, Councillor Basak, but again, like, and the city has done a lot. Like, and I know there's people out there, particularly very low-income people, who really need, pardon me, who really need housing, and they needed it 5 years ago. They needed it 10 years ago, right? And so we are doing what we can, I believe, as a city, again, through the project at 2025, through decisions that we made last week, through planning changes that we've made very recently, and we'll probably have some others that we will make in the upcoming months. And I feel comforted by that. I know the region is doing an awful lot, and we're considering reports again at the regional committee tomorrow to look at an additional 3,500 housing units over the next 5 years. I mean, I know there's people really struggling. We're never going to solve the problem tomorrow, but what I'm comforted by suggesting that we defer this, just to see how the market starts to shake out and what the provincial and federal governments may do or may not do, is knowing that even if IZ was introduced tomorrow, like, we would add 5 to 10 housing units. This is not the panacea. What we're doing at 2025, I think, is the panacea. IZ is important, but it's one piece of the housing continuum. So that's how I've resolved this in my thinking, but just wanted to share that as well. Thank you, Chair, for letting me add that extra.
Okay, at this point, I'm going to ask for one last call around the horseshoe to see whether anybody has any further comments, and then we're going to call it out. No further comments. We're voting on Mayor McCabe's revised motion, which is up on the screen. So that's Mayor McCabe revised motion report IPPW 2025-14. That is what we're voting on currently. All in favor?
Said a tie vote fails.
That is 4. And all against? That is 2. The motion carries.
Thank you. I'll assume the chair back then. Thank you.
Yes, I will transfer the chair back to you,
Okay, thank you
Mayor.
very much. Thank you very much, council. Okay, so Clerk Julie, do I need to read any more of this, or for the official minutes? Like the bill,
No, Mayor, we'll take the reading that was done by
By-
Councillor Bodley,
Okay.
which opposed the staff recommendation. And then I think that the reasons that you cited earlier, if you want to just recap them briefly again, for certainty is fine. If you want to just state the reasons why, but it's after the fact, so you're fine. You did that
Okay.
in your opening
no,
remarks.
okay, I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure I didn't need to read Bill 73 again. Okay, thank you. And thank you, staff, for the, for the report and the presentation. Okay, so moving on to item 12, consideration of notice of motion given on a previous meeting. There are none. There's no notices of motion. There's no communications and correspondence. There's no unfinished business. Council, are there any questions? Seeing none. Sorry, I'm just flipping back to here. Yeah, seeing none. Okay, council, is there any new business? Councillor Hanmer.
there's also, do you want to deal with the new business that's in the
Oh,
agenda
sorry, I
already?
thought you were
first?
speaking to that.
No, I'm
Oh.
not to that one. I
Okay.
can't to that one.
Oh, sorry, I'm kidding myself. Okay, yeah, there is new business. Marjana Zarek, Operations Schooner Street Brewery, Inc., by the glass application, that the city support the issuance of the manufacturer's limited liquor sales license by the glass to Schooner Street Brewery, Inc., subject to compliance with zoning and other applicable law. That's it. Now, this is new to me, so then do I see there's a delegate there.
Yes, this is the first time that I think this term of council has seen this type of application. There's a requirement. It's not something that happens frequently. I understand, I think that you might
Are you
maybe be able to speak
Mayor
to it, but I think in this case, it's a business ownership change that requires a license change, which then requires council to move, second, and pass this type of motion.
Okay, that's so moved. And sorry, are you Mayor Jana? I am. Okay, does she need to speak to it? You can't, I mean, if you'd like to speak to it, sure. Okay. Sorry, I apologize. This is new for us, yes.
You've got someone moving it, I'll second it, just so
Okay.
it's on the table.
Okay, so moved and seconded. Did you want to say anything or no? Nope, okay, thank you. All right, so it's moved and seconded. Any questions? I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, so new business. Councillor Hanmer.
Thank you, I do. And do you have, through you, Mayor Rook or Julie, do you have thank you. I have the opportunity to share with council something that is not directly in the city of Waterloo, but it is one of our academic institutions that is very excitingly hosting youth sport championships. So our University of Waterloo women's team last year placed fourth. They qualified to go and unfortunately didn't quite win the gold medal. However, they do get to host, and so we will be hosting this year and next year, which is very exciting, the championship, and it'll be at the Woolwich Memorial Center from March 20th to March 23rd. There are 11 teams from across the country that will be here, so the economic impact to the community is quite large because they will be staying in Waterloo, even though they're playing in Woolwich. Lots of good interest so far. There will be lots of professional women hockey league players in attendance as well. It's been a partnership. The University of Waterloo has done a fantastic job in partnering with all of the local hockey associations to try to encourage players and their families to be involved. So I would encourage, it'll be amazing hockey, and I would really encourage everyone to try to make an effort to participate. So I have had the privilege of being on the steering committee, and they've done a really tremendous job. So go out to Elmira, Woolwich Memorial Center, March 20th to 23rd. Schedule should be up fairly soon. The teams are still qualifying, so we, other than our own University of Waterloo team, we don't quite know yet who else is going to be there. It's, some teams may qualify on the 18th or 19th of March and then have to make their way here very quickly.
Thank you, Councillor Hanmer. I know that you do, in addition to all the work you do at council, you put a lot of work into the Waterloo Ravens and hockey in general. So thank you very much for sharing this information with us. And yeah, we all know that hockey's Canada's game, and it's another opportunity to get our elbows up and go out and support some women's hockey. Other new business, Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, just want to share that Waterloo Collegiate Institute's orchestra was in New York City last week competing in the National High School Orchestra Cup, which is held at the Lincoln Center. And they qualified for this last year, I think, competing, was it Music Fest Canada Nationals, which they won. This is a really extraordinary music program at a high school level in our local school board. And so they traveled to New York City and they competed in this huge American competition. They didn't win, but their soloists did, which is a tremendous accomplishment. And so I just want to shout out to Mr. Pichet, who is the head of the music department at Waterloo Collegiate, for just the tremendous amount of leadership that he has provided for that orchestra over the years. They are just a phenomenal group of students and really pull amazing things off.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Councillor Rowe.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to report that I attended the Team Dave St. David's High School robot unveiling on Friday. I think it was Friday. Maybe not. Anyway, they have created Suzuki, and Suzuki is an incredible robot, and they've created a reef game, which is actually incredible, and if you can check it out on YouTube, I really recommend it. And it's where the robot, they've made large pieces of coral, and the robot actually plays a game. It's really fantastic. So the team, I mean, I can't even wrap my head around these kids that are creating these fantastic robots, and the talent and the creativity is amazing. So anyway, big shout out to them.
That's wonderful, and that team, I think last year finished 4th in the world. It's an outstanding team, and the teachers and the community partners that support it are amazing. New business. I'll just remind people that April 7th is International Women's Day. What did I say? April. Oh my gosh, that's my sister's birthday. That's March. It's International Women's Day, and something to celebrate. There's all kinds of events. In Waterloo Region, the Chamber is hosting a Women's Day breakfast. Chair Redmond normally hosts, and there's a variety of Zonta, KW, the Canadian Federation of University Women. I mean, there's all kinds of organizations doing things for International Women's Day, and I would encourage particularly men to attend these events as well. These are not just for women. Anything else, Council? Seeing none? Okay, so enactment of the bylaws. Moved by, this one is, bylaw 18A is pulled, so that is not in there. It's just bylaw 18B. So moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Rowe. All in favor? That is carried. And adjournment. Moved by Councillor Bodley, seconded by Councillor Rowe. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great evening.